Cavalry skirmishing formations are really based upon the type of cavalry. If it's a light-rated cavalry or an irregular rated cavalry like Cossacks and things of that nature, most likely it's going to have the capacity to do skirmishing. And if so, they are considered full skirmishers across the board. There's no semi-skirmishers, shall we call, for cavalry. It's either full skirmishers or nothing. And just like the infantry, you would deploy the cavalry with an open order formation with a minimum frontage of 2 inches for each figure, or out to a maximum of 4 inches for each figure. So this 5-figure Russian Hussar regiment could extend out to 10 inches as a minimum distance, or all the way out to 20 inches if so the player wished to have it. And for example, I will just pop them out here. As before, your screen endpoints end in this corner, or this edge, and of course on the other side, just like any other skirmisher. And is considered a full skirmishing screen, with a frontage at least 2 inches per figure deployed. Now there's a couple other types of cavalry which might have some skirmishers. In the Prussian army, if you've hadn't seen the earlier video, they have companies called Freiwilliger Jägers. Like in this Cuirassier regiment, they've got a Freiwilliger Jäger attached. And this single figure could come out and deploy as a full skirmisher before their parent battalion, or in this case it's a regiment of cavalry. Only this single figure has the capacity to skirmish. None of the cuirassiers behind them have any open order capability whatsoever. And in other armies like the French dragoons in service of Spain, the Spanish theater, would have a very similar structure where they have a veteran dragoon company which was trained to skirmish, mainly to counter the items like the guerrillas and the small sniping actions which are ongoing in Spain. So they would have the same capability similar to a Freiwilliger Jäger to be able to deploy one veteran French dragoon regiment. Ordinary French dragoons normally would not have this capacity. Now there's one other country to keep in mind here, is the English. Now a lot of the English cavalry would be rated as light cavalry, but on the table of shock it's rated as second-rate battle or medium-weight cavalry, which normally would infer that they don't have the ability to skirmish. If it's rated as light on the national characteristics, it automatically has the capability of skirmishing. Think KGL and some of the Germanic Legion type cavalries which they had. But the ordinary English light dragoon regiments, which are rated as medium for weight when it comes to shock combat, they got those big, huge, beautiful horses, shall we say, can only typically deploy one figure out as skirmishers. They're not allowed to break the whole unit up and go into open order. It was a tactical doctrine. The English cavalry had, mass cavalry effect on the head, and they didn't really like to go out and do skirmishing. If they're rated as veteran English light dragoons, and they've been in theater for a long time, then the entire unit can go out in open order. But if it's fresh off the boat, like most English cavalry was, and they got this let's go charge the French mentality typically, you're going to find that only one figure can actually be used as a skirmisher. Because the English cavalry basically did not do skirmishing. They left it to their Germanic allies in the Peninsula theater. This also would apply to other units or nationalities which typically have some restrictions, and if there's such, it would be written up in the national characteristics if they have the ability to deploy any figures at all as skirmishers. That being said and completed, this completes a little scenario or synopsis on cavalry screen deployment. Keep in mind, basically if it's light cavalry, in most cases, or irregular, it's going to have the ability to skirmish. If in doubt though, double check the national characteristic rules for the individual nation. A couple more comments in regards to when you're dealing with skirmishing and open order formations, and the question of how many figures you can utilize out of a unit, or you reach to a point where you've put the entire unit out into open order. For single figures that can skirmish, i.e. like a Freiwilliger Jäger, it's quite simple. If you have the figure, you can do skirmishing. For instance, this Freiwilliger Jäger coming out of this Prussian Cuirassier regiment. As long as he's available in the unit, you can always put the skirmishers out, irrespective of the size of the actual unit. If you're using Germanic third rank line, you might only have a couple of figures which you can put out, up to 3 in this case, because this is a 9-figure battalion. If it drops down to 6 figures, then you can only put 2 out. If it drops down to 8 figures, you can only put 2 out too, because it's 1/3 rounding down to the next full number. Well, that's pretty cut and dry. You've got a surviving unit for the skirmishers to run back to instead of routing to the rear if the skirmishers are taking a morale check and they have to retire. Same thing for the Germanics. The third rank skirmishers will just immediately fall back to their close order brethren. But when you got to deal with a light battalion, like this French Leger out front, how many of these figures can you put out before you no longer have the nub, let's say, left over for the skirmishers to rally back onto instead of retiring to the rear? And the question is, you've got to have more than half the unit in the close order, or the nub, shall we say, formation. So in this case, since there's 9, I can deploy 4 of these skirmishers out as open order full skirmishers or semis, whatever. And if for any reason they took a morale check, these open order skirmishers, they would promptly run back to their parent battalion and attach themselves to the close order battalion. As so. But as soon as you deployed the 5th figure and you only had 4 figures left over, that's less than or equal to half of the unit, then what you've done, by default, you must deploy the entire unit in open order formation. You can't leave a nub of only a couple of figures and expect all these skirmishers to run back onto a small nub. So the rule is you got to keep it more than half of the unit as a nub, or a place for the unit to return back to. Not equal to, more than half. So in this case we have a 9-figure battalion gone out in full skirmishing order. Again, in recap, if I had left 5 of the figures behind, like such, and only used the 4, if something scared these skirmishers to run back to the parent unit, they would run back to the parent unit. And you can put them in a linear or column formation. Masked. Last but least, if the unit is in morale disorder, a close order unit, it may not deploy a skirmisher unit. That means you cannot deploy the Freiwilliger Jäger, you cannot deploy the 3rd rank formation if the parent unit is in morale disorder, or deploy from this morale disordered Leger. Once you get it in morale disorder, the command control does not allow you to throw a skirmisher back out. But if the skirmishers are already out in the field in front, and the parent unit for some reason goes in morale disorder, it does not automatically summon the skirmishers back. But once they're back with the parent battalion, until the parent unit or the parent cavalry battalion, whatever it is, regains good order status, it can no longer redeploy the skirmishers back out.